Hi, my name is Kurosh, and this is my show, the KJP Show, where we celebrate and elevate indie games and game developers. Today's episode is a little different. I've been wanting to do something like this for a while, and so what this is going to be is serve as sort of like a monthly installment of news that I want to present. And it's news not necessarily in the latest sense, but it's more so of the past month, and it kind of like a series of segments that I want to put together. Oftentimes, I see news being shared on games day and date and in the moment, and you don't always get all like the bits of news in full comprehensive fashion. So what I'm gonna do is usually share like one or two relevant stories from the past month. I want to talk about some upcoming games that I think are worth highlighting and looking forward to, and maybe any additional items that come up. But that's kind of like the rough rubric of what I'm hoping to do. So if this jives with you, if you have any thoughts or feedback, I'd like to build this out with you, the viewer, and kind of make this a show that is informative in a way in which you find useful or helpful. So let me know. Let me know what you think as we go along with this. This will be like kind of like a monthly installment of this. And so the reason I want to do the stories a month out is because, as I was saying earlier, like you get the news moment to moment. I think when you remove yourself a little bit from what's going on moment to moment and kind of see what has transpired over the past month, you can get a clear picture of what took place. And in some ways, like if I look back on this in the past, or if I'm looking for what occurred in something, you kind of get that comprehensive series of the news elements or the story that took place. And so that's my hope here with this, is that I can kind of give a more comprehensive kind of look back on what occurred with a given story that I'm deciding to present. Now let's get started, shall we? Today's first story, and actually only story, we changed things last minute, but it's our only story today, involves some fiery passions of democracy for players in the video game of Helldivers. So this game, Helldivers, released in February 8th of this year by Arrowhead Game Studios and was published by Sony Interactive Entertainment as a sequel to the 2015 top-down shooter Helldivers property. So it's a sequel in which you fight bugs, fight aliens and robots and all sorts, and spread democracy in a very satirical fashion. So this game was initially promoted as a new game in Sony's kind of games as a service lineup that they had available, and it had initial hopes of it being successful, but it found way more than initial kind of like the successes that they were expecting. The game launched on Steam and PlayStation with an overwhelming amount of players wanting to jump in, and it's addictive, kind of hilarious co-op nature that goes into it, myself included. I did not expect myself to be caught up in this, and I definitely did right out the gate. And as a result of that abundance of players jumping in, Arrowhead servers were not expecting that in the slightest, and so they were breaking records left and right on Steam, primarily like concurrent player counts, the highest amount of people playing a Sony game on Sony game on Steam. Part of that is that Sony has been working. Most of their console exclusives have largely been on Sony consoles. They've been working over the last few years to put some of those games, such as God of War, Spider-Man, Last of Us, and a few others on Steam, available for PC players to take place. And this was one of their most recent ones that they put on there. And the server issues and bugs that they were going through at launch didn't stop players. This resonated so much so that players were just pushing through. They flooded the servers, and Arrowhead Game Studios continue to work on the bugs and try to help alleviate those issues in those first weeks. I spent many hours myself in those first weeks just trying to log in, and I think many players also went through that same experience. And it kind of reminded me in some ways of Pokemon Go when it launched. It kind of brought everyone together onto this one game, and despite its issues and crashes and everything, people still were just frothing at the mouth for it. So one important thing to know at this point in the story is that while they're solving all these problems and everything, Sony had certain things that they wanted addressed, and that it would be a looming concern of theirs. So Sony, having put some of their games on Steam, has required in past folks to be able to, when they're playing games on Steam, they don't need any accounts. And so now they've been requiring, for their games, they've required PlayStation accounts to also be part of that login experience. They removed that temporarily and to alleviate the issues that Helldivers was going through so that people could jump on. So this game was going out without any requirement for Sony logins or Sony accounts. There was plans to toggle it back on at a later date, although those plans were not really clearly communicated or mentioned in any fashion. I don't recall myself any experience of like this being a thing, the no notice or whatever. So it was very much just kind of like it just didn't happen. And so this is one of the major reasons why there was such a massive uproar in a negative way for the Helldivers community. When notice came around that Arrowhead Game Studio was going to toggle this requirement back on, fans started making noise, and the noise was a lot. And that's for two main reasons. Actually, maybe three. One, this came off as kind of like a sleazy move, just from a standpoint of Sony trying to get accounts, trying to just get an extra grab, and it's like, oh, this game you're already playing, now you need to do this login requirement. But two, and probably the biggest reason why this is such an issue, was what it was doing to players in other regions. Sony accounts aren't allowed to be in certain regions, or the Sony network is not available in certain countries. And those, it's not just some one or two, it's over 177 other regions and countries. And that ranges from Philippines to Afghanistan to Madagascar to many, many, many more. And so this is why when people had some of their biggest issues is that the people that had paid full price for this game, they've been putting countless hours in this game, only to find out that in the coming few weeks, they would be required to just not be able to play. They couldn't play anymore. They were being put behind a requirement that is no longer available. So that is not even an option for them. I should mention the third option, the third thing that they said was that this added linkage was due to security reasons. And it's kind of funny because PlayStation has been facing numerous security breaches themselves a few times. So for them to say that was the reason for this didn't come off as sincere as many thought. Now you might be saying, okay, well, why, people can just get refunds. And that's where some of this issue comes up in an even bigger way is Steam's requirements for refunds has two parameters. One, you have to have bought the game within 14 days of the requested refund period. And two, you have to have played less than 2 hours of the game. And so this pretty much screws everyone in those regions and further accentuates those issues that they were going through. So now you might be asking, like, what happened next? Well, it's kind of interesting. A few things happened. One, Sony stayed quiet. That didn't help anyone. Two, Arrowhead Game Studios, the developers of the game themselves, were facing the brunt of a lot of the criticism and feedback. And they've been, through all the bugs and issues that they've had, they've been having very clear and transparent communication throughout all of that. And that didn't stop here. They continued to be transparent, so much so that they were saying this requirement was being pushed on them by their publisher, Sony Interactive Entertainment, and that if fans really wanted to speak out about it, they should speak with their reviews and with their money, and in asking for refunds. Steam was kind enough here, that being the third part of this, is that Steam made it so that those prior refund requirements didn't apply to this game. If you wanted to, you could get a full refund no matter how much time you had put into the game on Steam. So players just began. What's funny is, for a game, this game has weekly or periodic major orders that it kind of has all the players unite on and go collectively work towards. That didn't stop, and this was like almost like another version of that, where the studio had said, if you want to give this feedback, do it. And so what preceded was this review bombing of a game that was overwhelmingly positively reviewed on Steam to now becoming one of some of the lowest reviews I've seen in such a short period of time. Over a span of a weekend, the reviews plummeted. And there's actually like a little picture that kind of showcases the graph of reviews and the drastic drop in which it takes for Helldivers 2. So over the course of a single weekend, the overwhelmingly positively reviewed game saw players turn their reviews and create new reviews with negative ratings in dramatic fashion. Several days after that, Sony finally decided to break their silence and say, and kind of retroactively walk back the ask. They took that requirement away. They said they were no longer going to be requiring players to make the login account for this game. They heard their feedback. They will be doing so going forward with future games. The next game in their lineup was Ghost of Tsushima, which has come out already, and that will be requiring players out the gate to have Sony login requirements. The bad side is that those regions that initially that wouldn't be able to do the Sony logins, new purchases could not be made in those regions for Helldivers 2, even though that login requirement was no longer made. So they didn't fully walk this back. That should be made note of. But ultimately, what did we learn from all this? We learned that in a relationship, open and honest communication can go a long way. Out the gate from the beginning of things, if Sony was transparent about it, of these requirements, why did they even need these requirements in the first place? Are they adverse to making money in other regions where this game became incredibly popular and helped them reach the heights that this game wanted? And you kind of see the effects that the publisher, the developer made, and the bridges may be burned by this between the players and the publisher, or the developer and the publisher. Will they want to work with them again? Who's to say? But you could see a stark contrast with how Sony handled the communications and how Arrowhead Game Studios handled the communications. They were transparent throughout the whole processes. They were working with the consumers, trying to make things understandable and give them the feedback they had in a constructive and clear way. I really applaud the studio's efforts there, and I think it's something to be cautious of with the major studios or the major publishers like Sony or Microsoft, for that matter, with their own issues that they've been having this past month as well. Now let's shift gears. Let's talk about some upcoming games in June. There's a game that just came out by developer Evil Empire, which was the studio behind the roguelike game Dead Cells, which is coming out with the game The Rogue Prince of Persia. This is coming out in early access. It's available now on Steam, published by Ubisoft, and they had just come out earlier this year with another Prince of Persia, but this is from a different developer and more in the Metroidvania stylings. This one's more of the Dead Cells style roguelite. I'm personally very excited for this because I'm myself a Persian, and hearing the development videos that they've been putting out, they've been taking great efforts to try to incorporate it and draw influence from Persian mythology and Persian musical inspirations as well, mixing it with some modern takes of their own. So I'm very interested in this. After I'm done recording today, I'm going to go try this game out. Next up is a game. It's a new franchise, a small IP you might have heard of. It's called Kingdom Hearts. It is coming to Steam on June 13th. And this has previously only been available on PC via the Epic Game Store. And I'm excited for two reasons. One, Steam Deck verified. Two, mods. I'm excited for this to be available on the go in a nice, fluid fashion. And also, I'd love to see the mods that people throw into this game and just the shenanigans we can get up to with Kingdom Hearts. It's already crazy as it is. Silly Riku. And next up, we have FromSoft's Elden Ring is finally getting their muchly anticipated DLC on June 20th. This will be called Shadow of the Erdtree. Many people have already been excited playing their old files from Elden Ring, and I am looking forward to it. I'm kind of going to be holding off until it comes out, but it should be in a whole new story with a lot of crazy boss fights, so check that out. Lastly, we have Hashtag Blood is coming out on June 18th, and it's an insane action RPG adventure where you fight off vampires and field hockey practice at the same time. I was taking a look at this one, and it really caught my eye because it's got that hyper kinetic 90s style cartoon animation style to it. So I really want to see what this looks like and plays like, because the visuals just grabbed me immediately, almost like I was watching a cartoon, but I'm curious how it feels and plays. And so for our last segment, I'm going to kind of go over some videos that I've been putting out recently. Recently, we put out our impressions of Melatonin, the game, and Hellskate impressions as well. We also have our Gigabash review, and we did a little video discussing how we play video games and the various ways in which that can take place. That's been it for today's episode. My name is Kurosh, and this has been my show, the KJP Show, where we celebrate and elevate indie games and game developers. Thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you think of this style format, this whole different style of episode. I'd love to hear your feedback, your thoughts on the news I shared, how I shared it. And thank you again for watching. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you next time.